First, let's address the whole salt loading question. The amount of sodium in your blood isn't going to dictate whether or not you sweat. I mean, if your body has water on board and cooling is a challenge, it's going to sweat. So salt content be damned. The salt content in your blood will rise and the osmolarity will change, and that'll change nutrition, hydration, and other aspects of it. But the fact is, if your body has the water to ditch in the interest of cooling, it'll do it.
I think the confusion around that probably comes from the saying that people say, like when you take in salt electrolytes, that it helps your body hold water. But we're talking about,
that's probably what it is. Yeah.
We're talking about storing water within your body. That doesn't mean that it can't sweat it out.
Yeah, and a crucial part of salt loading is water loading too. I mean, you bring in more salt so that you can retain more water, which means you're taking in more water. So you're maintaining that balance in the blood, which can result in higher body weight and puffiness and things that are undesirable to some athletes. But in terms of performance, are probably usually very beneficial.
Right.
So you just have to recognize it's not just about ingesting more salt; it's also about packing on more water.
Yeah, absolutely. So I interrupted you, but I guess jumping in on the I guess the balance side of things, on the different things that you're trying to balance. We're talking about sodium and the water balance.
Yeah, and so one of the things that can go wrong in that case is if you do ingest too much sodium, then you've got too much sodium in your gut, and of course water follows sodium, or water follows salt. Let's put it more simply. And that's where it's going to go. So it's not going to go to the muscles. It's not going to dedicate itself as effectively to thermal regulation or cooling. So you have to recognize that if it's just the same thing I said just now, more salt means more water. And if you take it on during the race, you're going to have to balance it with water intake also. So you can't just slam the salt tablets. In fact, you shouldn't be doing salt tablets anyway because of the chloride aspect of it. But if you're ingesting a sports drink with high sodium content, even then, that you could have too much sodium per bottle. I mean, that's another balance you have to figure out.
Yeah, I think so. You have a hot race, and you're like, I'm going to do these sodium gels with it.
Yeah,
but it really depends on
especially with a gel too.
Yeah, the sport I think it depends on the sport you're doing, because some people will load up on salt in their drink, and do both at the same time. If you're doing a mountain bike race, hard to drink enough water, right, to balance it.
Sure.
If you're doing an Ironman where water is like plentiful and you can't
on the run course and
everywhere,
and then you're in position and you have it, and then there's 8 stations you come across.
Triathletes have like 12 bottles on their bikes, and you'll have plenty of water to make sure that you get the right balance.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, and also consider what is your sweat rate for a race. I mean, just because you're racing doesn't mean you need a whole extra heaping of sodium unless you're dumping buckets of sweat. It's a hot day. Even humidity would probably affect that too, because you're not going to shed as much water. So there really are quite a lot of things to consider.
Well, I think humidity, you'll shed more water because your evaporative cooling will be down. It will be harder to cool off.
So your body will keep trying.
Exactly. Yeah. And you end up sweating more.
Yeah,
you end up being covered in like a bubble of humidity. Just evaporative cooling isn't as effective.
Yep.
Yeah. It's frustrating.
But just some numbers to kind of maybe put this in perspective for some people is that the people who do shed a lot of sodium when they sweat, and they're sweating a lot of salt's coming out, salt stains, all the telltale signs. We're talking the high end of it's usually like 1,000 milligrams per hour. So when you dose yourself with maybe a pre-hydration drink or a post-hydration drink, or maybe you're just thinking I need a ton of sodium during, keep that in mind. 1,000 is a pretty high. I won't even call it a medium, but it's the high end of things. So a lot of the time, maybe you just need 500 extra milligrams instead of the typical, 250, 350 that are in a sports drink. And then when we talk about that preload stuff, that hyperhydration stuff in particular, you have to be very clear on the fact that you're a high sodium sweater, because those things pack 3,500 milligrams of sodium per. I mean, wow. At least with hyper, and then I think Scratch's, whatever Osmo's equivalent is, and the big companies have these hyperhydration, super high sodium packets. So you got to make sure you are, in fact, spending a lot of sodium.
I think it depends on if you, there's 2 reasons why you would take that. One is you are a high sodium sweater, or 2, you want to be a camel and hold a bunch of water.
You're preloading. In that case, again, it's not just salt preloading; it's water preloading.
Exactly,
thinking of it as overhydration or prehydration. I mean, whatever term you want to throw at it. And then post is almost as important, because you shed, you'll ditch a lot of sodium, even if you're not a high sodium sweater. You're going to be low on sodium stores. So I understand that with like the rescue hydration, 1,500 milligrams post is not a bad idea either.
Yeah. I know that with this sort of thing too, like you can, like you said, in gels, you can get it in blocks. You can get so many different sodium enhanced products, I guess you would say, or like packed full of sodium products, like those.
It's not hard to come by. It's just like caffeine. It's with everything these days.
Cliff Bar has that salted margarita, those Cliff blocks, and they come with a ton of sodium. So you can find it in a ton of different ways.
Sure. But the point is, if you ingest too much sodium during your race and you don't have water to go with it, it will actually dehydrate you.
Yes.
So that could cause cramps and stuff.
Basically, you get a lot of sodium in the gut, and the water goes to the gut, and it's not going to where you actually need it. You don't necessarily need to facilitate or direct most of your resources to digestion. You need to direct it to cooling and to muscle operation.
But you can't drink enough water to balance it off.
Exactly. It's balance between salt and water intake.
For what it's worth, for me personally, I found that I don't do very well when I have really high sodium products. Like even those, I love the taste of those salted margarita Cliff blocks. When I take them in, I usually get gut distress. And I think it's because I'm usually doing mountain biking, that sort of a thing. And it's tougher to take in enough water, perhaps, for me to be able to balance that out. And I'm not a very salty.
Your sodium loss? Yeah.
Very minimal. I think I've had salt stains like twice.
Yeah.
Like hardly ever. So
yeah, I'm a very salty sweater. Okay, and then let's address the weight loss that he's talking about, because that's a real common misconception too. People think they get off the bike, and if they didn't drink enough water, or if they weigh less than they did when they started the workout or started the event, then they did something wrong. They got their hydration wrong. And that's not always the case. It's not simply a matter of hydration. It's not just it's total body water, not just what you sweated out and ingested over the course of it. There's also a little thing we have talked about a few times, glycogen. And glycogen packs a heck of a lot of water with it relative to the glycogen content itself. I found one study, because I was trying to quantify it. I've seen so many different, some people say there's 2 grams per gram of carbohydrate, 2 grams of water per gram of glycogen, 3 grams, 5 grams. It's been all over the place. Most people land at about 3. There seems to be a consensus there. But these guys did a study where on 2 different occasions, they took 9 aerobically trained athletes, dehydrated them over a 2.5-hour ride, waited an hour, and then gave them 250 grams of carbohydrate with only 400 mils of water. So like half a water bottle.
If you're watching on a video, I have a bottle right here. This is like a 600 milliliter bottle. So
standard bottle.
Standard, and this is a standard bottle. So that's somewhere around below the choke point of a bottle where it starts to get
It's
narrow.
just not much. These athletes are completely dehydrated, and they're just kind of teasing them with a little bit of water. They gave the other group of athletes, they matched their water loss. So they if they lost this 30 ounces of water, they gave them 30 ounces of water to ingest with this 250 grams of carbohydrate. And then they took biopsies an hour after and then 4 hours after, and in both times the glycogen content was similar. So glycogen replenished just as normal, but the body water with the group who only got a tiny bit of water, they replenished at a 3-to-1 rate. So they had 3 grams of water for every gram of glycogen in their system. Same glycogen between the 2 groups. The group who got matched water had 17 grams of water for every gram of glycogen.
Wow.
The fact being, you can, in certain instances, depending on the dehydration method and the rehydration methods, you can pack a lot of water in with every single gram of glycogen.
They were so dehydrated.
Yeah, exactly.
So they were able to
but the fact is, when you're looking at these weight changes, it doesn't necessarily mean you got your dehydration wrong. Maybe you just spent your glycogen stores. So it's not just about go in there and hammer a bunch of water so you can bring yourself back up to the weight you were prior.
Yeah.
So that's a good point. So like measuring weight as just weight at the end.
Doesn't tell you everything.
It doesn't just tell you. That's exactly right. There's more to it.
2,000 calorie workout. We did a long podcast before where you could actually measure how much of that would be fat and how much of that would be glycogen based on a gas exchange test. So let's say half of that's glycogen or more, right? That's 1,000 calories. That's a lot of weight, right? That you're going to be losing.
Yes.
1,000 grams, so 3,000 grams. Is that where you're saying
1,000 grams?
1,000 grams.
Don't do math on air. Ever. You guys all figure it out in your head.
It's a forum.trainerroad.com.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, for instance, if you take a 150-pound person, 150-pound man, so let's assume there's a fair amount of muscle mass. Men typically carry more muscle. There's about 100 grams of liver, typically, or glycogen in the liver, another 400 grams or so in the muscles, and we know that's pretty shapeable. So we're looking at, 500 grams in the muscles and liver times, help me out, 4 grams.
Math on air.
I think we're doing it the opposite way, but
well, that's 500 grams, which means about 1,500 grams of water go along with it.
Yeah.
So that's 1.5 kgs. I mean, we're talking a fair amount of weight just in what a normal non-endurance trained
just in
150-pound male will carry.
And utilizing the glycogen that you could have.
So you get rid of that, and boom, there's 3 pounds gone.
That
doesn't necessarily mean you're dehydrated. It just means you spent your glycogen stores.
Yep. Yeah, great point. That's a really important one, because whenever people talk about post-ride or race weight measurement and compared to pre, it's almost always used in the context of dehydration without any any attribution.
Any consideration for where that water came from.
Someone on 4 on TrainerRoad, just do the actual math.
Yeah,
Put it
yeah.
in the
I think I was
That'd
pretty
be
close on
great.
the last one. That was pretty simple.
Yeah, so that's pretty close, straightforward there. I guess talking about heat management. So now we kind of have the science
Yeah.
behind it all. Now we
Yeah.
can get more into the heat management side of things.
Yeah, so he's talking about doing sweet spot work in particular, and we've talked many times before about how it's such a steady high load that you burn a ton of calories and you shed a ton of water. It's just the cooling is very important if you're going to do long sweet spot workouts. And it sounds like he's set up to do exactly that. But then how does that carry over to the outdoors when he hasn't done any form of heat acclimation, when he's done all his workouts in a warm environment and he plans to work out just that hard outside in pretty high temperatures and very high humidity?
All of his workouts in a cool environment.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. There's, we did a podcast. You can go through and you can search "Ask a Cycling Coach" podcast, and then look for heat adaptation. And you can look up sauna. Plenty of stuff. We've covered this before, but Nate and I, we rode entirely. This happens every time too. I rode separately. I rode in the shower.
They showered together on bikes. Weird.
And I tried a humid one. I tried dry environment. And oh my gosh, it makes, when we're talking like these rooms, I think that we got one because I put heaters into there. I used the shower because it was a closed space, basically. And we had heaters in there. I think that it was like 102 degrees inside that room and zero air circulation.
Yeah.
And
Which is very work rate limiting.
oh yeah, and Pettit was like the hardest workout I'd done.
Yeah. So what we learned from that is that do most of your training in whatever environment is most favorable to being able to complete the workout as prescribed. So you can do a lot of work, and then at some point close to your event, you have to spend some time acclimating to the heat you're going to expose yourself to and the workload you're going to try to sustain in that heat.
That takes 10 to 14 days, I mean, usually.
Thereabouts. Yep.
Yep.
To put this another way for you, it would be a shame to train inside. Think of all of your workouts, but you're capped. Like almost like you're trying to
like being at altitude forever, never adapting to it.
So that's why you want to be very choosy about the workouts that you do. Include this heat, adaptation sort of effort that you're doing. Is fit it in on the workouts that are lower intensity, and also keep in mind that lower intensity workout afterward, you'll feel pretty much more work than you would have normalized to or normally as well.
This goes back to Guy's comment. You don't want to limit your workouts. This is like the demotivational playlist.
Yeah.
Like, I should do all my workouts hot because I'm going to have a hot workout in the future. No, and the sad part about it is that these heat adaptations, you've researched it, Chad. We're a team here. We did it.
It's a we. That's fine.
They go away quickly too.
Yeah.
So you can't do it in March and then expect to get it in July. Just do it right before your race.
They're short-lived, which is why you have to time them accordingly.
Now, the plus side of it is you don't have to be in extremely hot circumstances. You can get these benefits from 85 degrees Fahrenheit, that sort of a thing.
You can. We talked about this recently. You just have to elevate core temperature, and you can do that at reasonably low workloads.
So
Wearing
you don't,
jackets too and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
a lot of
too.
ways.
Yeah.
So if you're working outside, so let's say that you are in a warm environment, you plan on racing in a warm environment, but usually train indoors where it's cool. If you train a couple times a week outside in that sort of heat, you're going to be getting a lot of the benefits that you get if you intentionally created that environment inside.
Exactly. And we talk a lot about what we're seeking with that, and it's just a bump in plasma volume so that we have more water on board. So back to the whole water topic. But something I don't think we touch on enough is that there's a familiarization aspect to it, psychologically being braced for what it feels like to do work in heat. Because I did a district TT years back. It was 100 degrees. I hadn't done any heat work. Last couple of days, I tried to jump in the sauna a few times. So maybe I got a little bump in my plasma volume, but I went out there and it was so strikingly unfamiliar that I just fell apart. I mean, I couldn't work from the start. I overdid most of the race and then I crumpled.
Oh yeah.
So,
yeah, there's a you have to be able to go through those situations and be like, I emerged okay, even though I felt like I was cooking, like I was on the surface of the sun. I emerged okay. It really does, especially when you're talking about something like a TT that requires so much focus. There are certain races like a criterium, for example, where you may, the constant tactical nature and you paying attention to the riders perhaps might take it off.
Just from the start. I mean, even if I had done like a 14-day acclimation protocol in the sauna and my body was braced for it, the fact that I wasn't mentally, and as soon as I got out there and started rolling around for a warm-up and then rolled down the ramp to start, it was like, this is too hot, I can't do this.
Got in your head before you started.
Already in my head, exactly.
Yeah. That happens, I think, to a lot of people before they get to like Kona.
Oh, yeah.
They've heard all the stories, and before they even get on the plane, they're like, "It's going to be so hot."
Then
And
they
they
get
get
off the
destroy me.
plane, and it's just like, boom.
Oh yeah, then reality hits. Like, it is as hot as I thought.
Yeah, exactly.
Shoot.
And there's something to be said for preparing yourself for the reality you'll face. But or I should say for mentally preparing yourself for that. But if you aren't actually prepared for that, then you're doing yourself no favors, right? You have to be ready for it. So some tips, if I could. I want to share some tips, at least that I've done in races that have helped me manage heat. If you have feed zones available in the sort of racing that you're doing, and if people are able to do this for you, or you could put it on the ground or a fence post or something. But if you're drinking mix, have a bottle for mix to drink, but have another bottle of water that you can grab. That might involve 2 people in a feed zone. That might be the best way to do it. So then you can grab one, or if there's a fence post or there's something on the ground, something else, you could probably pull over and grab that bottle.
Without the lid on, right?
Yeah, so I actually like the lid on in most cases. So then I can squirt the water directly where I want it rather than dump it out and miss myself. Yeah. So, and I usually squirt it onto the back of my head and neck. I don't like to go on the front.
If you've ever made the mistake of dumping it over your head, you just
The glasses.
hose your glasses down.
Yeah, and you can't see, especially if you're like doing gravel riding or mountain biking where it's dusty, because then it makes it even worse on the lenses.
Or if you're a salty sweater and there's a bit of salt in the mix, it does. Yeah, your
eyes
glasses
go
are
crazy.
useless past that and on fire.
What Jonathan's trying to do is make his body into a swamp cooler.
Yes.
Where there is extra water on him, and it'll be a little bit cooler, but he really is going to get cooled by the evaporative cooling. This is when you get to that 100% humidity, this can be tough.
Yes.
There's products too. I think these have been shown. You got to keep them wet, which is the hard part. But these white sleeves you can wear. A lot of people wear them at Kona, and you'll see them where it's trying to make your whole arm into a swamp cooler, and it has a little bit of space, so it holds a lot of water. You spray that on your arms.
Yep.
People have like their whole jerseys like that, and then as the air goes over you, and it's not 100% humidity in Kona. It evaporates, then you get the cooling effect.
You see that in Kona where the guys are actually taking sponges and they're just putting sponges all over in their body, and they're trying to make sure they're getting as much new, colder water on them at all times.
The sponge is nice too because you can you get like a more than one shot out of it. So when it's on you, you push it again, and you get a little bit more.
Yeah, you kind of squeeze it.
They heat up fast though.
They do, yeah. And I usually put that water, like I said, down my back, on my lower back, on my knee, or on my legs, like my thighs, that sort of a thing. That's where I try to. That's something that I've seen Nino do, and then I tried it, and I was like, that's silly that he puts it on his legs. And I tried it, and I was like, this feels really good.
There's some interesting studies with cooling the hands too.
Yep.
So, and I know you can't really do that if you're in a mountain bike race holding onto the bars, but if you are in a triathlon or something where your hands are free,
definitely
to
like holding ice cold sponges or even like just holding ice. If they have a bucket of ice and you can hold ice in your hands, it's because all the blood vessels are close to your skin. Like the skin, and it can cool really well. Another area is your nether regions. You put ice down there, but it's like this crazy thing where I've said this before. I gotta say it the right way.
It's a bit of a seesaw there.
Yeah, you've never been so cold and so hot at the same time.
Yes.
Like you're numb yet sweating profusely, but it's a great area to cool to help you rest your body. And the other one is people put it under a cap.
Yep.
So you can people will fill their entire hat with ice, like at a hot race. This is running, obviously, not on the bike, and put the hat on. You do all those. You put it on your hands, down your jersey. You do the back thing, and then you put an ice cold cap on.
I'm thinking of like have somebody pour some crushed ice over your helmet, fill in the vents a little bit. That could help.
Well, drinking ice slurries of ice too will help. That's better than if you can ingest some ice like a Slurpee kind of thing.
Yeah,
I think Slurpee should be on race food. That sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
But yeah, right. It's
perfect.
But that will cool you better than just like cold water alone.
Yeah.
Because it's colder, right? Because there's ice in there.
Totally. Ice nylons. So that's like, you'll see that on a lot of riders. They'll put them down the front or the back of their jersey usually, and they're nylons, or you can get things that don't look like nylons anymore. They're like a pouch that's made for this. It's really, a nylon will do just the same.
Reusable then?
Yeah. And they're reusable, washable, that sort of a thing. But you basically fill that with ice, and then you put them down the back of your jersey, inside your jersey, and then they melt down. It keeps the ice in place while it melts. The only thing I would say with that is get used to them in 2 ways. Number one, if you've never had ice nylons and somebody puts it into your jersey when you're on the line, it's going to take you a little while to get over that initial shock of having ice against your back, and you might not want to do that first thing on the line, right? The second thing is when the ice melts, I find the nylons to be super annoying, and I do notice them in my jersey. So I would recommend getting used to them. And then also, if you do notice that they've melted, a lot of the time you'll see people will leave like a little tab out of their jersey. Drives me nuts, but you could pull it out from that too. I'm not a big ice nylon fan just because of those other things with it. So.
A thought on this: Leadville, that power line climb. If it's a hot day, you had an aid station right before it, but there's no wind, and it's like an hour or 40 minutes long.
So
that would be a great spot to do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then you could then take it off, like rip it off and put it in your pocket, your jersey pocket when you're done.
Exactly right. Yeah. Then white versus black, it's always better to go with white. Some fabrics have coatings on them, but even then, I think still, even with the coating on them, black is still hotter than white.
Yep.
Then ventilated helmets, I know that sounds silly, but like you even switched helmets at Leadville, didn't you? We switched helmets for you. I think it's a good idea, and you can really tell a difference when you go from one helmet to the next in terms of that. So it's huge. Jersey and bib combo is almost always going to be cooler than a skin suit.
Yeah. With the same materials.
With the same materials.
Well, is it?
So it depends, right? Like, so the ones I use Quarre ones, and when I unzip in the front, it basically opens up my jersey entirely, but it's still not quite as cool as having the jersey and bibs, because I feel like there's less fabric directly on me when I unzip my jersey. Just
that's true.
You know what I mean? So
yeah, and the unzipping, that's a huge part.
Yeah.
Especially on a climb where you're not going to be worried about the wind resistance. You can fully unzip and your back is like free.
Yeah.
Where it wouldn't be free in a skin suit.
Yeah, even a 2-in-1 skin suit, right? It still isn't fully free, whereas your back is. If you're wearing a normal skin suit, those things are really hot. So that's really uncomfortable. But, arrow over everything, I guess, for some folks. And then refrigerate your entire hydration pack and keep it in the cooler. And you can freeze your bladders and then refrigerate your pack if you want. Or forgive me, I got that backwards.
Freeze your bottles.
You can put your hydration pack in the fridge with a ton of ice, and then you can freeze your actual pack separate of that bladder. And then it seems like a silly thing, but your bag actually has a good amount of material if you get that thing wet beforehand even and then put it in the freezer. I think that's what Jeff Kabush was doing. And then he had his hydration packs kept in the cooler for Kansas. So then when he got it on, it was like putting on an ice vest almost too.
Yeah, great.
So it's a really good help. And even if you freeze your bottles and you're going to start cold in the morning, obviously your bottles aren't going to be much use. But if it is warm, you'd be surprised how quickly those things melt out. So you could even freeze bottles as well. So those are all tips that I've done or heard of being done for heat.
One more thing for Anthony, going back to, he had a question.
Yeah, he did.
He said he was down, he was still, after that Sweet Spot workout, the 5x12 minutes at Sweet Spot, he was still down just about 1 kilogram of body weight. With the glycogen, Anthony, I wouldn't be concerned with that. I think that amount of water loss, even if it was all water, wouldn't be enough to reduce performance. Like, you can lose, we know that you can lose water weight and not reduce performance. You have to lose a bunch of water weight, and then you start to lose performance. What's the famous book by the South African Dr. Noakes?
Noakes.
Yeah,
Lord of Running.
No, he did one all in water.
Waterlogged.
That's it. Yep.
Yeah.
He's got lots of science around.
Yeah, that's actually a good book. And he points out in that the best marathon finishers, I think it's always typically talks about the Comrades Marathon, which I think is 50K,
are the most dehydrated.
Yeah, are the most dehydrated. I mean, like a 10%, 9 to 10, maybe not 10. I think 9%. So it's substantial. It's a lot.
That I've had a problem with that, because if dehydration did make you slow down, like when people do get so dehydrated they slow down, then they stop and drink water, and then you finish it hydrated, right? So I don't know who, like, the most without affecting performance, like
correlation, not causation. Potentially they
weren't necessarily even looking at performance so much as core temperature at the end of that. So they found that even though these people were heftily dehydrated, they still had core temperatures in line with the people who were hydrated.
That's the takeaway, I think, is not that the most dehydrated people are the ones that win, but you can be this dehydrated and still win.
Yes.
Because someone could be more dehydrated and not win because they stopped.
It's not a race to get as dehydrated as possible.
Well, I mean, the thought of losing weight during a marathon is good. So you do.
It happens.
You want to have that balance.
Yeah.
The people at the top end, if they try to put in, just so we talked about, all that water the whole time, they could be, how many pounds did they lose?
Packing extra weight the whole time. Yeah. Well, 9% of it, I mean, even a runner weighs 120 pounds.
Yeah, so that's could be
still a lot.
10 pounds of weight.
Pounds, yeah.
That's a lot of weight.
It is.
For running, especially.